Hey folks, this is me, Vishwas, and I'm the host of this webinar, the recorded session, whatever the thing that you want to really pursue towards. I felt there is a lot of demand that an ML system can create just by getting some insights. And I hope everybody understands what's the absolute potential of an ML system towards getting that bare minimum understanding of what it can drive as a value. And I feel glad that I'm in this era doing a lot of machine learning stuff and a lot of things are happening. So I'll just share my screen so that you get to know what is the actual perspective of putting in MLOps into an accessibility perspective. That means everything and anything is accessible. How can you do stuff and things like that? And so we can start learning about it. So I'll share my screen. So Chrome tab, Chrome window, whatever works. I think let's go on with the full share screen, so not a problem. I hope you guys are able to see my screen. Oh yeah, you guys are able to see my screen. That's awesome. So let me just go back to the slide so that you get a perspective of what we are talking here. So MLOps and DevOps, so data science perspective. So this is what we want to deliver when we want to deliver a business value, because every time it's all about going from a step-by-step approach, and I want to have that approach here as well. So if you look at the literature survey, I've added a bunch of things which is from 2020, 2021. I think it was the time where research was fully work from home. So I just love the strategies which are coming up in these white papers. I think these are some resources from a company which is non-conventional to the MLOps. So it is Core Chef here. It was a regulatory compliant MLOps and things like that. So here it is. So there are a lot of concepts that I really wanted to talk about. So it's just concepts at the end of the day. That means there is a physical signal, that is a data is coming in and out of a system right now. And now we are able to see that there's an ample amount of change that's going on. And it's still concepts which are going to affect the business logic that we have. So there was a different business model that always worked in the SDLC. That means a business logic was always a waterfall, agile, DevOps, and Scrum. And all these things, as in technology or an concept, still revolves around application architecture, application infrastructure, deployment, or packaging. So if you think about what's happening in the world of software engineering, DevOps, and things like that, it's still you're dealing with physical, virtual, and a cloud machines that are still on your console in front of a front-end console of portals, and you're still delivering file system to them. And Docker is just an enabler of that file system. So our typical development process is develop, test, stage, developers deployed, and it's reviewed from the DevOps engineer. But typically, this is what a DevOps infrastructure means to me. It's just code, build, test, release, deploy, operate, monitor, plan. So typically what happens in a Docker hub is just a fact that you just push as many code as you want. And guess what? It's still big enough to have that sort of an memory which just gives you that purpose. Okay, you know what? You do not have to worry about your environments that are changing. Just push the code and we still can take care of physical, virtual, and the cloud machines. So it's just a simple understanding that we require right now. So a typical data system looks like this. A data is getting stored. There is a collection of data. There's transforming it, normalizing the other steps, build a model from the data, deploy the model that is going to the end user. And so now our typical development and DevOps lifecycle is still going to be developers test stage, and they are deploying just by reviewing from the DevOps team. That is, they still know the logic behind it. So what is MLOps? MLOps is nothing but a data model. You're still creating, verifying, packaging it. It's in different form factors, so don't worry about that. So you can release it, configure it, monitor it, whatever it takes. It's just going to take a good amount of time in order to give you that accessibility. That means you are enabling the process. So the research methodology is always about, can we bring more adoption in terms of the communication from the dev and the ops team? Can we get the model production without really cutting down the processes that is really required and not overdoing some stuff that is unrequired in the process. So software lifecycle is for the developers. We are able to enable them. That's good. So developer's perspective, who is in the ML team. So a developer typically develops a lot and lot of front end, back end stuff. He just calls an API, and guess what? They monetize on the deployed model. And that's a feedback loop that comes from a business team, but always there will be a data scientist who will be monitoring them, who will be saying them, you know what, let's make it look a little bit more better and more fascinating with respect to a lot of things. And they go mad. They will say, you know what, let's not settle for 98%. You also come join with us. We'll start deploying 99.99% accuracy wala model, and we are done with it. So a data scientist always has his own favorite tools or wrappers. There's a version control, and guess what, your models keep changing their way they behave over a course of time. So there is a model management system that is always required. So if you ask me, who has seen good amount of H5 files, I think I would say we are supposed to communicate with the ops team. The microservices knowledge has to be there. There is a serverless trial and error testing at the scale that will obviously keep happening, because we still deploy models as an APIs, or else as a container, or else on a VM that's taking a lot of cost. We still do a lot of trial and error. So of course, there's a top-down review of the versions and the cloud and anything and everything that we are considering. Communication with the devs, communication with the ML team. The results and the discussions are typically from a cloud and a DevOps practices. This is just taken from an academic perspective, which is going to give you a lot of suggestions on how an ML system needs to evolve. So there's a 20% increase in the development process by changing the GitHub strategy with the review of with the ops team and things like that. You are still giving a more efficient code commits with a model built. Efficient compute usage increased by 15%. That means you're cutting down cost by a way bigger folds. Efficient in compute usage is fine, but can we make the team more efficient? That is where the teams get more efficient. Commits never gave 0 day. That means you are still going shift left and you are looking back at the security of the model. Communicate with the server and the app and an efficient deployment. You need it more aggressively. So you need to learn more beyond it. So if you want to really get a perspective of what it is, just go through this conclusion slide. I want to give it a last approach so that you have every little metrics that you really wanted to have. And there is a lot of future scope for research that can go on. So let's just go on with a demo. So this is all just created, but just go on with it. So I would say this is a magical button. So worship this. So this is an Azure ML learning resource that can be created using an Azure portal. It's a simple strategy that you have to do. Just go and type ML. You will get the amount of resources that are typically used by a scientist on an Azure portal. Just go click on it, and guess what? You can still go back, create the application, create the workspaces, create the registry, and you can start working with it. So now, when you go and create it, it's just asks you for the same old boilerplate stuff. You know what? Do you have a resource group, which is a virtual repository of all the resources that you have? Or do you want to create one, DevTron? That's my organization. So you want to say Dev resource group. You can name it according to the industry standards, but I'm just showing it to you. So let's do Dev resource group. So this is what we are working towards. Let's click on it. Yes, there is a creation of a resource group that is going to be a virtual repository of all your cloud resources. Workspace, just give it a name, Vishwas, Narayan. That's my full name, so you can just connect with me on LinkedIn. So review and create, it'll just start creating a set of resources based on the subscription that you have taken. And of course, there is a lot of things that goes behind. The region, it really makes a lot of impact. So if you want to go and say region for the compute in Azure ML, there is going to be a set of dependencies where you're going to think about, hey, you know what? Should I take this subscription, that subscription? Should I put the ML resources in this file, that file? Compute targets. How should I go on with it? If it's in a bash, data lake, whatever the workload it is. So you still go and deal with it. And the moment you start clicking this button, there's a set of resources that will be automatically given to you. So let's go on with it. We just start creating, it will just go ahead and it will initialize the process. It will just go on with it. So now, why I wanted to show you this is because it's far more easier than creating your own environment. So let's go with a demo environment so that you get a chance to learn what it is all about. So by the way, the ML that I'm showing here is already pre-built, pre-packaged. There is a failed workload that's coming up. Okay, why it happened, what happened, everything can be known, as well as why it got done. You can know anything and everything about that entire infrastructure. You just need to just go on with it. So this is a set of tools and the practices that is just required for your MLOps and things like that. So you're basically connecting the compute resources and making sure the money minting process becomes much more easier and faster. So this is a notebook, this is an automated ML, this is a designer. You can choose any approach. You can still go ahead and create your own models. So at the end of the day, you still go back and use a model. And this is where endpoint comes into the picture. Let's say you want to know where are the models that are getting created. And you go back and check, okay, this is what I'm doing. Okay, let me just go try getting a batch endpoint, a real-time endpoint, also a web service, whatever it takes to get that model out for the production. That's what you care about. So let's go ahead to the home. Let's create an AutoML. I can show you how it goes and what it is. So it has changed a lot. Azure ML has changed a lot. So let's go ahead with it. So this is an already pre-rigged data set which is there, but I want to create a new data set. So let's say I want to say new demo, and it's still going to be tabular data because it's Azure ML, AutoML, which we are just using right now. And let's say I want to use Azure Storage as one of the options that is required for accessing this application. I'm still going to go back and use it. I just have a local file and I just want to put it down on the Azure infrastructure. You can still do it. But let's say I did it using a web file. So let's go ahead and check how it looks. But if you are an out and out architect, you are having an SQL database which is dedicated, still go and connect it. So let's say how a web file looks. So I had a CSV file which is still going to be your Pima India data set. You can still go back and look at it. So just go here, paste the link. You can skip the validation, but I personally prefer validating the data before we rig up a model. So just go ahead and paste it down here, and there you have it. Within a short span of time, you still get the view about what kind of a data it is. That is, it's delimiter, it's comma separator, it's still a CSV file, and you get every little matrices that you're talking about in that data set. So what is it? So the encoding is also there with you. That means you need not have to have that system level understanding what's happening in the data. It's just there in front of you. You can still review it, but I would never say that. Just go ahead with it. It's a simple demo that we have. And of course, if you don't want to really bug down your model and things like that, you just can edit some of these matrices that I don't want to consider now. So just click on the next and you still have it. So create it. So it takes its own time and it will start creating. This is a multi-million-dollar process in an organization. I'm just showing it, but it's still a lot of time that it's getting consumed and things like that. So let's just go on with a new demo itself. So I just have used the same data set here itself, so don't worry about that. So let's say you have to select a data set. You selected it. You can choose an existing environment, or else you can create a new one. Let's say a new one. You can choose a cluster. I had created one, so you need not have to worry about it. So target columns, Let's say I put diabetic prediction function. That's a decimal now. So let's see what is the suggestion it gives. So if you can see, it's a decimal and it's a regression value. And if I do classification, it's not going to take it. That's how an ML decision needs to be accelerated. That is, an ML process is not just going to be functional, it's just going to be something that involves in your process of SDLC. That means I go ahead with the regression, it's happy to give me a regression model out there. Or else, let me just choose one more. Uh, let's say I choose a data set. I come back here and I say, okay, create a new environment. That's perfect. Okay, let me just go back and refresh this. Okay, let's go back here. It takes its own time, so I can take some more time. So let's go back with Vishwas. Hey, that's my name. That's not a problem. It's still a data set. Perfect. Let's go click on it. And I choose a different metric now. Let's say I want to give a target as an outcome, and I want to use a cluster, and I give it its classification, and I press regression. It still goes back. But when you see in the past, classification was never taken. If you say for time forecasting, it's not supposed to happen. But let's say I want to build it as an NLP model, it's not happening. That's how it is. And don't worry, it's still going to be a lot and lot of image data set. You can still keep adding them and things like that. So don't worry about that. So you can press next afterwards. Let's say I want to do a classification. Go ahead with everything. Validation is one step, which is going to make sure that data set is clean and clear. And this is what happens when you press a finish. It creates its own job. It starts creating its own model. It's going to take some time. So that's where I didn't want to waste your time, and I created it beforehand. So this is some randomly rigged up process, which really gave me a ton of model with explanation. That means any ML scientist wants to know what is happening in the entire devised process that is taking up a lot of money, and I need to know some insights about it. So there are a lot of features that we are adding. There are a lot of things that we are thinking in and out of an infrastructure. And there you go, folks. You still get an knowledge about what is happening here. So let's say you want to download a model. You can go ahead with it. It's still in a preview, but you can still go ahead and use them at any given point of time. So don't worry about it. So new experiment one, that's absolutely fine. It's working good. So I want to deploy a model. Let's go click on any model. Let's say this is the model, which says a voting in symbol. That's one of the topics that you can really go back and learn for the ML. I want to deploy it as a real-time endpoint or as a web service. That means your deployment has a ton of value in AutoML itself. That means you are not having a glitch of going back to this resource or that resource. You still have an entire access for it. It means just go back, click on the web service, and say deployment, and just say you want to use an Azure container instance. That absolutely makes sense. Go ahead and use it. Deploy the application, and there you have it, my friends. You are successfully triggering a process that is going to give one more endpoint. This might be unhealthy or transitioning. Probably if it goes healthy, I can even show you that model as well. So let's say we have Vishwas here, and it's JSON editor. You still can go back and check this endpoint here, but it's 0. That means I'm non-diabetic. Let's say I want to put 10, skin thickness is 10, random metrics, so that it just gives me some data out there. BMI, let it be 1000 or 100. Oops, sorry for that, Grammarly. And test it. It still gives me 0. That means it's still deployed and it's still churning out the process and saying, you know what, it's okay, fine. He has a bigger BMI, whatever it is. But this is a limited set of a data set that can be used for rigging up a process. Let's say you go for a tool like Hopscotch. Hopscotch, sorry for that. Hopscotch API testing. and just go here and send an invite, or post an invite, or whatever it takes. It's still going to be a little bit more magical and mystical here. It's all right, Jason. And I'm going to copy the same thing here. I'm going to close this tab so that you guys don't have to see my conversations. So, okay, so this is the one. So let me just test the model with some JSON editor. It should give me a 0. That's it. So I send it, cookies, and it overrides whatever it takes. So the content type, everything will be known. That means an API is getting recognized here. So you can test it out with respect to a different patching methodologies and things like that. You can still go ahead and edit it. Nobody is stopping you from editing this entire lifecycle of devices. So that's how it is. So an entire deployment process, which was supposed to be there in one single point of truth. That means this portal is going to give you that thing. It's just being there for you. So the deployment is ready. That means it's healthy. Before it was just transitioning and saying that, you know what, it might get deployed or something. Let's say I want to test it now. So it still gives me 0 because it's still trained on the same data set and it's a different model that is getting used. But you just accelerated yourself an entire process that can be used in actually manufacturing and business logic, which uses an ML in a seamless fashion. So this is how it is, my friends. You can start learning anything and everything that is required in order to build a logic out of an ML model with a lot of accessibility and MLOps embedded inside it. So this is the end of the show, my friends. Thank you so much for tuning in. So see you soon.